My hotel is number 27. You'll see it in the upper center, excuse me. And where we are right now is just a little bit below that. My hotel is number 27, just about in the top center. We are now standing a little bit over to the left, to the right of the 13, indicating a highway. And today we're going to migrate, now shift now to the bigger map. You can see this is the insert we just looked at. I'm going to be going down to the lower right of this map where the Talat Dao new market is. And I will see whatever I can see today. Today I think is Sunday the 16th. We're looking down the main drag. And today I'm going to do a walkabout. Now just to give you a little background, my visa here in Laos ends on the 23rd, which means I have to be out of here by the 23rd on the bus en route to Vietnam on the 23rd. So I'm planning on leaving the 22nd by bus to make sure that there's no time hang-ups between here and the border. Unless I can get a visa extension, which I have to get at the police department. But I can't get at the police department today because it's Sunday, and guess what? They're closed. At this point, a block or so away from my hostel, or hotel rather, the Royal Pakse, is Wat Luang. We'll take a quick visit inside. Nothing, I think, will be extraordinarily different. Here's just a pan of this triangular intersection. So the outside is quite large, but somewhat understated. It's quite a large complex. My first impression is it could use some paint, but otherwise just seems to have an old patina. Nothing bad about it. So we'll take a closer look, see if we can find something of interest. Here are all these similar pagodas outside are kind of interesting. They don't look like that's a result of individual donors, but it might have been. It's interesting what they put in English. Smoke-free, okay. Sometimes no parking, but oftentimes nothing in English to give us the name. Here it's tossed in along with smoke-free. Whatever it's called, this is the big hall, probably where dinner and meetings and so forth take place. Look at that detail up there. A Buddha with a representation of a cobra head behind him. Looking at the interior view of these individual pagodas. Excuse me, stupas. Interesting. This is a building nicely maintained. And the whole grounds are nicely maintained by these young monks. It's interesting, the Nagas, which are not Nagas, but have human persons depicted, look like they're begging, which may be exactly what that represents, would be most appropriate actually. And this may be in celebration of the family or the couple up there. That makes sense. Just do a quick pan of the inside of this old Catholic church, being apparently restored, at least on the outside. Stations of the cross, pictures around this outer wall. It's interesting too, they had a school clock hanging on the wall. I wonder if it's just to I don't know what it's for. It's curious that they have those, because if you're in a Buddhist church where you're in control of how much time you're there, maybe it just allows you to keep your schedule. If you're in a Catholic church where your priest controls how long you're going to be sitting there, you're looking there because you can't control it. A false brick, well, it is an appropriate aesthetic medium. Seems to be an appropriate philosophical medium. This wide boulevard may be a reflection of the French influence. This little bit outlying from the center area is more tranquil. Of course, it is a Sunday. Guessing this kind of style is what they refer to as a French style. I don't quite know why. Style is prevalent all over Laos, Southeast Asia, and it's even including new buildings like this one, or newly remodeled. So it may be true. There's an example of just burning the trash. Some new construction going on, facing and on the opposite side of the road from the Mekong River. One of my mini goals today was to get to the river, not a hard thing to do. This wire you see crossing from right to left is not a wire, it's actually water. The water line brought over to serve this little, probably a sales kiosk. Here the potential to have a very pretty viewscape for this hotel that we just saw being built. I don't know what that mountain is, but it adds a nice allure, and there are mountains in the background to the right further on. That should be Thailand. It's probably one of the friendship bridges. That was the fantasy, here's the truth. You can see the potential. Maybe these people with their big restaurants are hoping for that potential. I hope they're right. Once you walk through the trash, there's a very nice restaurant, it looks like, down there, right on the Mekong. Here's the live fowl market, I would assume. This road, now that we've turned onto, goes up to the new market. Some pretty, I'm assuming, new buildings, and certainly a European style. But for what purpose, I don't know, since I don't know how you get a look at it. Home Depot. It's a strange complex surrounded by this metal fence. Probably government. Spent some bucks making it look good, but it's like a pearl sitting in a sex pool. I'm assuming that behind those buildings, you look through there in the center now, beyond Vien Tin Bank, which probably is a Vietnamese bank, is the new market. Just entered into the market. We'll take a quick look at the transportation infrastructure. And here's how a great many of the individuals and pairs and triplets get here. To sell fish live. I've seen those somewhere, but I don't know what they are. I think I've seen something similar to it in the States. Maybe some of that stuff that I had in that soup the other day. Motorcycles, as far as the eye can see, some kind of a fruit, I think. They're a little bit puffy. I've had them before. I think they taste like limes. Keeps them alive by stirring them. These are squid, so perhaps they require a different treatment than just the fish. So these don't get much. Those are just catfish. They're just given enough to survive. And see in a market like Pakse, which is bigger and more sophisticated, as things are actually individually packed in some cases, making them more appealing. You could drop back and take a look at all these videos and get a sense of how marketing and everything else can get more sophisticated. Presumably as the market itself gets better and better. All the hog comes here, flies and all. Here's a whole nother section of these tuk-tuks, little restaurants. Just go in a straight line through the market, get an idea how huge it is, because they are huge. You can see way down there, kinda. Here less of the produce and food and more of the housewares. Candles are the shoes of Asia. Section of Buddhist specializes in tapers or candles and anything that relates to that. Big ones, small ones. Again, just analogous to streets. in cities like Bangkok, where individual streets will be dedicated to certain products. The theme of retail remains in the street designations of Hanoi that I'll be visiting in the next month. The spices, if only you knew how to use them. There's a lot of spice. Wrong 3 times in a row, twice. These are tobacco, they're not tea, and they're not spices. So what you're looking at here, you're looking at X number of deaths at an early age. At least they've cut the big tobacco companies out of it. How each merchant gets an edge on certain products like these dried flowers that go along with her shoes. And I'm just panning to the right so you can see the lady that is beneath that tarp sitting down there. I think she's just found an opportunity to set up a place where somebody else has not opened up their little shop yet. Anything like that is an investment or thought of here in Asia.
Okay.
Something seldom seen in Asia. Now all these will be sold. I guess it takes eons because they still must be producing them. I'm guessing I'm walking past overall and missing several 100,000 shoes, mainly sandals. Get back, we're moving a little bit away from my direct line. We're going in that same direction now, but we're at the opposite end of the large square. And here we're in a huge meat packing section. You can hear the chopping knives working. Hurts himself doing this. You wonder how this meat, which will spoil, gets sold. We're on the periphery of the square again. I think I have an orientation to where I'm at, but I'm not sure. All this probably goes wrapping completely around it, at least if the other 2 or 3 sides are still available for this as opposed to parking or something else. Incredible amount of food and everything else that you see in Asia. There's that meat section we just walked through. We'll walk through some more. Here's some of it already prepared. So here we have large restaurants for the people that visit as well as and shop as well as the people who work here. And all down there, even more restaurant shop with more traditional shoes and women's beautiful garments that they wear. We're in another building that is part of this overall market. This one dealing a lot in leather and fabrics. It's nice to see. I think I'm now in another massive building. I think probably several of those buildings are here, interconnected by roofing systems, as you can see, like this one. Here are your bed clothing, blankets, probably comforters around here I've seen, cushions, rugs. The knowledgeable person, the person who's local, knows where all this stuff probably is and searches it out. Becoming familiar with where stuff is in Albertson. Farmers' implements, particularly if you have your own pole, which most of them do, bamboo implement that women would carry and men would carry working the fields. This wood may be used for kindling. I don't think it's the same wood that they use, for example, in Myanmar for complexion. Although those leaves are used for that beetle juice, I think. At least they look like it. Only imagine what these are used for. I know what that's used for. The thing is, when you're in a large city like this, you may not have access to what you would have if you were in one of the small villages. The lady picked the long piece that she wanted, and that woman cut it down, and now she'll pay for it after bargaining for it. Back where I started, or at least where I wandered earlier, but I don't know how I got here, so we'll take a different route out. When all else fails, I'll pull out my iPhone and figure out what direction I'm really supposed to be going in. If you're going to have to spend the entire day here, you better have some form of entertainment. Some don't. Gold shops are everywhere. Usually they're in one spot. Here I find them sprinkled throughout. More expensive and elegant sandals. Probably women, maybe men, have several different pairs for different occasions, different functions. The cell phone tells me this is the way I need to go to get out, so this is where we're going. Back into the food section. This is indoors. This is inside one of the big buildings, so these people who are in here have lucked out compared to the people who are probably not the regulars, or at least the long-term regulars, and have to function outside. That must be the water source up there. Look at the cobwebs. One can only imagine. Remember, a lot of this comes from the fields of villages. There's how you clean up a coconut. You buy one of those little knives and go to work. So when you get those things out of the stores, probably there's some kind of machine that does this for us. This is where they grind up coconut. What all this apparatus is for, but that's where it comes out, I think. And this is where it goes in, but what all this is for, I don't know. It's just shaking this, which I think is a way of determining how much milk is in it, or maybe even its age, how ripe it is. Sabadi. They have a pile of coconuts. The milk is out of that, so they're going to keep that and use that for something. Okay. No, thank you. I don't know what that's for, but it came out of the center. Suggest that this is the coconut section would be an understatement. Complex now, and go wandering off to, I think, find a Chinese temple. One of the main exits coming out through here. You see tuk-tuks lined up, motorcycles coming out, people carrying the stuff they bought for today. And out in this section is apparently large fruit. And again, you can see this comes right from the villages down through distribution channels, pretty much analogous to the States, just far more simple. But for these folks, equally effective. This section with sugar cane, that's what this must be here, yeah. And now this will get divvied up and go out to the individual vendors who have the machines for pressing the stuff into the juice that people... Big fruit there, which may be this one here, yes it is. So this is that one right there, a Honda repair shop, complete with motorcycle jacks. And I'll guarantee you Honda is the best. I guess I'd say this is a relatively new operation. Theoretically, this is open today. It says daily. We're approaching another Wat with its what looked to be pretty much the same, but not quite. Rows of large stupas around the perimeter. Here are the ranks of what I might call last-minute merit seekers. By that I mean that perhaps these are crypts for their remains, and they put up these merit pagodas, perhaps to say to their god, okay, I didn't do it before, but here you are. I'll pan this site. Not altogether inspiring, except for those who live here or worship here. I'm guessing this used to be a stupa in parts. I'm guessing these reflect the 7 days of the week. I'm guessing as a stupa in parts, perhaps like that one there. So you assemble the components as you wish. Rather tawdry looking building, falling into disrepair, added onto occasionally. And this, if I frame it correctly, is a pretty collection. This last building getting considerable recent care. Ironically, on this deteriorating building, these Nagas are deteriorating with a certain amount of drama due to what I think is an oxidized original dark blue color, green. I stopped in this restaurant in Champasak after downpour rain, well, not downpour, but a pretty heavy rain for most of the ride down here from Pakse on my motorbike, which means I've learned how to do that. Just go slowly and stay underneath whatever the threshold of safety is for the bike so that you're well in the safe zone. So I'm in this restaurant that is owned, I think, and run by the parents of a young woman named Bobby. At least that's how close it sounds to Bobby to me, so that's what I'll use. And her parents were teachers, but of course they didn't make much money doing that. Surprise. And so they've opened up the restaurant. She learned English. I asked her why she speaks such excellent English, and yet everyone here, all the young people in this area, went to the same school that she went to, and they don't. Her explanation was somewhat interesting, and it was that most of those families are in farmers raising rice, and so they go to school, learn English, but then go home and they can't use it, so they don't use it. They don't have the confidence, they don't have the practice, they don't have the context for using it, and so they don't. And then they're, of course, like most of us, afraid to try to use something that they know they have no skill at. Notice, if you notice, but these are little shells, or not little shells, big shells, snail shells, I guess, with little plants that are growing in it. Makes for a lovely decor, doesn't it? Over here are some wood carvings that look kind of interesting. I'll ask her about it later, but these are masks. How old they are, I don't know, but masks are very important to indigenous peoples all over the world in all times for various uses, but principally to represent certain gods or other characters of their philosophy. And animism may well be an endemic philosophy or religion here in villages in Southeast Asia, as well as other parts of the world. I think is the traditional basket that women would carry into the fields. And here I have my favorite meal, really, because it's light and it's filling, and I think it's really good for you because you get lots of vegetables and so forth. Notice, dirty vegetables are not a problem from their viewpoint. That's just the way vegetables are as far as they're concerned. I won't use that part. So now we're about to enter the ancient city. I don't think it's ancient anymore, but it's the site of. It's the area ahead of us. And then further on, I think 6-8 kilometers to Champasak Wat Phou, Champasak, the ancient city. You can park over there, you come down to that point there, you turn right, you get some kind of piece of paper, then you go in there and you give them that piece of paper, and then you give them 50, and they give you this ticket, and then you walk over here, and now you can go in. But it's all prettily done, which is nice to see. It's one of their great assets in this area, archaeologically for sure. That is the end of the new road that brings us here. The new road is great because it goes down the west side of the Mekong, and I think it's the Mekong, and you don't have to cross over on a ferry boat to get onto this side. I'm guessing that's the ancient city we just came through, which of course is no longer ancient. Although it does look like there's an ancient hydrological system that might be explored, although it's probably not described or defined for the lay person. And this is where we are now. A lot of the literature here just deals with commonalities of the Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos area. This is a linga over here. Actually, that is one, and so is this one. More often seen in Thailand, or Cambodia rather. This mountain is famous, has its association with this site. That pinnacle at the top, for lack of a better term, is considered to be representative of the linga, or the phallic penis symbol of Hindu Shivaism. There is also apparently a spring at the base of this mountain somewhere that they believe probably motivated the originators of this site to site it here. We're just at the museum, which is to the right of the complex that we entered into. Looking at the literature, I see very little to give me an indication of where I'm at. Now over here, you'll notice where it says situation map, there's a boray, and this would be a boray. A boray is like a reservoir. You see these in the Angkor Wat complex of sites, and by that I mean not only Angkor Wat but all of the numerous sites surrounding it for dozens of miles radiating out. Looking at this other diagram, which I'll just show it to you. Don't see the boray, unless I don't see the boray in it, but on the other hand, looking up at the side of the mountain there to the left, you can see that set of terracing. I don't know if that's an allusion to this terrace or not. The other information in site directions, I'll just walk down this side of the boray. Down there to the right was where the museum was, and this is the boray, if I understand from one of their diagrams. View does seem to match up with this drawing that I have brought with me, showing this end of the boray and steps going up, which we saw. And apparently this long dumbbell shape is this area where the big tree is. That length there looks like it held some towers, and there we'll go explore that a bit. There apparently is the ornamental entrance, or the entrance to the ornamental something rather. Although I don't know from my drawing what this was for. You'll notice that rock there has 4 holes in the top of it, suggesting that something was rooted into that. These big trees are doing their part to rip apart some of the remains of the walls. You can see some of it intact, but some of it being shifted about by forces. Plus all these rocks at this corner have those holes indicating that something was here. Probably some kind of wall or pillars or decorative entranceway all throughout this section right here. You can see that. You're looking from this end, I'll pan about, but you get a sense of the one end of the dumbbell, then the raised center portion there, and the other end of the dumbbell beyond that. Here we're standing just above the steps that you saw depicted. And we're just above the steps that you saw depicted in my drawing at this end of the boray. And I wonder if ceremonially boats would arrive here and you could walk up what might have been a set of steps. Now I'll do an about face so you have that view. On this axis, running I think east to west, with the dumbbell going off to our right and our left. Standing in the middle of the dumbbell, at apparently the highest point of this overall dumbbell shape, and presumably there are some steps beyond us here that would take us down into that causeway. The causeway is, I remember, very typical from Angkor Wat. Off to the right here is another boray, what would have been a long and narrow one going up to the base of the mountain, and to the left the same, creating the symmetry that we're looking at. We're at the top in the center of that dumbbell. We're now going to be going towards the bottom as I've got this drawing orientated. What's a little bit interesting is this brickwork. I don't know if that was original or some kind of temporary reconstruction. I don't know if it's just me or the sunglasses or what, but those seem to have a brilliancy to them. The interpretive sign, number 1 is the sanctuary, number 2 is the spring, number 3 is a portico, and number 4 is the library. Okay, don't see that. Oh, there's that number 4. Okay. And then 5, well, you'll see in a moment. So we were standing on 14, which was the platform, and 15, of course, the boray. So this is the first interpretive sign I've seen. Interesting tree with some flowers appears to be about to bloom, unless that's an actual bloom. This barren looking tree with its very pretty flowers looking overall outer worldly or otherworldly, I first saw in Luang Temple. We're going to begin our trek down the causeway. I'm sure that these posts that you see to the right are actually representations of the linga. It's an extremely dominant motif in Hindu religion. With Angkor Wat, these borays, or reservoirs as I'm calling them, were a very political and economically critical artifact. They're not just for design. Politically, because they gave economic power to those political individuals who could claim that they were filled and could therefore sustain the crops, etc., of the community that these people were a part of, and that the ruler dominated, presumably with his connection to the gods who kept these filled. Guess is that all along the edge of what would have been a nicely manicured causeway, this one's eroding, were other symbols or icons of the religion. It even had a curb, and from the suggestion of those holes there were uprights, so maybe it was almost like a little pony wall, if you will. Much is left in the way of the detail of the working of the stone, but this may be a good representation. Notice if we look at these several right here, the top parts are of different heights. In fact, the entire column is of different height, different thickness. One can only wonder what the significance of that might have been. We were more than halfway down the causeway, and two things seem apparent. One, there is a division in the boray as to its length. It's divided on this one here, and this one looks a little bit farther back than the other we just looked at. Second thing are these little knolls right here, which I think would have held some kind of a little structure, maybe a shrine or whatever. I vaguely remember something from Angkor Wat like that. Now we are almost at the end of the causeway between the borays, and we can see the two large rectangular square pavilions that are the next component, if you will, of this complex, and on its own raised elevation. Just presumably will aid them in reconstructing these buildings. I think any faithful reconstruction of antiquity is a tribute to the society that lived and created this complex, or any complex, but equally so it's a tribute to the sophistication of the people who restore it, the society that restores it. It reflects that that society is wise enough to realize that it is merely part of a chain of history. Now that this has a allusion to what we saw in Myanmar is probably no surprise. I suspect that all of these cultures over time shared various architectural details, mixing and matching as they chose. This is the first time on this part of the trip that I've seen this kind of cylindrical post treatment, looking almost like they were turned pieces of stone. But these levels here, of course, were very much in evidence in Myanmar. It's interesting to imagine what causes these shifts in the stone. This one slightly is the largest, that one slightly smaller, and that one even more narrower. Is it just subsidence, or are there earthquakes, or is it something else? And here's a temporarily reconstructed portion, as are a couple of others nearby. An interesting stone. Just walking this way in search of a location to sprinkle upon the grace of my body. I urinate. I smelled kind of a sweet, acrid smell. That's not contradictory. Looked up and saw at the base of this tree, and looking up, here's the fruit. But what's interesting is it seems to grow not off of a extended limb end point, but right on the main branches themselves. Here, dangling right from large limbs. That's the first time in my life I've seen that, I believe. Looks like I'm at a site, quite informal as it is, where they make and or restore these post-like features. Corner detail, we've seen that before. These 3 Nagas nested. I'm sure the man who carved this would be pleased to know that it still had gained respect. Entered the quadrangle pavilion, one of them, and you can see how this lays out a corridor, perhaps a long one, each with its own series of windows, as we saw. What use would have been made for this central portion, I don't know. It doesn't appear to have any steps going down. This portion, which faces on the other side the main axis towards the mountain, is wider than the small corridor we just looked at. Before we enter into it, I'll just pan all of this so we can see some of the remaining detail. Notice how these columns, which we saw in the museum, somewhat emulate in a more precise and detailed fashion the windows. All of this looks very much like what we saw in the temples in Myanmar, except that this lower treatment carried all the way to the top, as opposed to blank walls like this, which were probably covered in plaster. If I'm right and they were plastered, those edges may have allowed that plaster to rest, and then this sloping here would have facilitated drainage. Interesting is, even before we enter, and as we begin to enter, are more of these holes, but they seem to be also right in our way, so who knows what that was. Come up one more elevation. Here are the door notches that held a post at the end of the corner of the door so it could pivot, and there we can see a pivot hole there. Now what's interesting is it pivoted right at this point right here. So what was this for? Unless it was the means by which you put the door in, and then you put a piece of wood or something into this part right here to block that lower post into that section there. The insides of this door are not worked in stone except for the very edges. Perhaps they were then covered by another stone, or purposely left flat so the door would close, or plastered. Don't know. Now in this little room here, which probably guarded this higher corridor, a little bit wider I think than the first one we looked at, but it's also has its beautiful framing and some interesting detail at the top that we'll take a closer look to now. Those triangular pieces that we saw that were temporarily restored and rebuilt outside would have fitted on here. Not those in particular, but something like them. From left to right, it looks like that sinewy detail is probably a snake, perhaps even a cobra, perhaps not. There seem to be faces as well as just graphics up there. Here, this post is in good shape. Apparently did not get the weathering, which apparently comes from the left as severely as the other side, which is totally erased. Only the tour groups don't come in here since it wastes their scheduled time. Here's another entrance that faces to that east-west causeway. Nice, looks like nice enough stonework. It looks rough, but sufficient, I suppose. Including that top of that doorway. If UNESCO anticipates the sloppy workmanship that it gets from local craftsmen, oftentimes in these countries when they finance these restorations. On the other hand, this looks reasonably nicely done, but you can see there's a significant difference here. That is shabby, unless the architect was suggesting that this part here originally was that thickness, and then perhaps he's correct. Interesting, because it looks like that's a door post there, but that stone sits considerably higher than the bottom of this. The angle on those stones at the top may suggest that this was an arched or corbelled ceiling. Turned into the far right, came along that long corridor there, looked out through this, what looks like a main entrance into that quadrangle. And now we'll continue our trek up along this axis through another elevated causeway of more lingas, but here a five-headed Naga. We're in this area called the galleries now, I believe. If there were other structures along here to the sides or not. On the other side there is. So there's a small building that's associated with this, because there is an exit from this causeway to it, and that same rough design is reflected to my right. See that this causeway was visually restricted with a wall. Again, perhaps forcing the focus on what perhaps is a greater drama up here, and of course the mountain. Presumably we're standing right at the end of the gallery, and I'll show you my drawing in a moment to orientate. We'll go up those stairs provided for us, right where the tip of my thumb is, I believe, roughly where we're looking, and we'll go upstairs that have been built around to the right and left of that. If I'm correct, we're standing on top of that area. I'll show you in a moment. I'm doing a 180, so we're looking up the mountain again. I believe that we just came to where my thumb is, walked along that, and there's the next set of stairs. For those so inclined, a little hint of how this might have been laid out. Probably some kind of archway up through here. All tumbled down, awaiting reconstruction. You can see some of the pretty stonework, and I got a feeling that this piece of stonework was taken off the top of something and dumped here. We're now presumably walking up this long, narrow T formation, if you will, in front of my thumb. To that very pretty arcade tree. I think that all of this area that's been cleaned back was cleaned back and perhaps maintained, even had features on it. See some of those indentations over there, although I don't see them replicated on the left side. This is an interesting structure here. A rather an abrupt stairway climb. Whether the trees were originally here or not, How old they are, I don't know. Interesting is all the stones on this walkway have holes in them, which kind of blows my theory as to their being for the purpose of securing something above them, another stone to something. This is just a big stone with a hole in it. Here perhaps an idea of how this was laid out, with these kind of short walls along the sides. It seems that all religions, certainly the old ones, demanded physical exertion as payment of the right to get close to where you worship the god. You're wrong in accusing them of simply placing this stuff here as steps, although I'm not convinced. Be a bit surprised that each elevation had an archway with those well-worked stones as components. So here's the top artifact, structure, temple, if you will. Our man accused me of being tired. I said to him, no, I just wanted you to think that I was. We had a chuckle in here because I think it requires taking my shoes off. I don't feel like it anymore. As I pan about at the base of this cliff, you'll see that there were more structures, whether they were buildings, just walls and stairs, or shrines, perhaps like this one. I don't know. Notice up there a cave. Now somewhere along here is the spring, and we'll go look at it. Notice how I think the subsidence, or the slippage, if you will, of material downslope, perhaps from the weight of this building alone, is cracking it open right there. Someday, someone will pay a price for that. This interpretive sign, the spring is up ahead of us, and a shine, which I think is probably a shine missing its R, off to the left, an underground drainage, which will be interesting to see. A gallery, and then another water drain, and then presumably this is the building that we were looking at a moment ago. So this may have been the shrine. But imagine what this was like, as I've said at every site I've been at for 20 years, when it was brand new and the rock was fresh and clean and straight. Just like a new Notre Dame. It would have awed. Apparently the spring is just literally dropping out of that ceiling of rock in this cave, coming down this Naga into here, and then flowing after that, although it's been tapped by man. The water flows out of more than one place here. What's interesting is that a spring should be this high on the mountain. It says that this represents a margin or boundary line between relatively soft rock and a layer of hard rock that for some reason either the soft eroded away within that layer, or the layer somehow allows water to perk through it. But even symbolically, the presence of water here would precipitate a holy thought. And the base of many of these structures, I don't mean the foundation, I mean the walls and everything of the building, is often brick, just faced in stone. This looks like it's been carved into the stone. A worthy effort. I think that's a Shiva icon with the multiple hands. And notice the four faces. We see three, but would be one at the back, I believe. No evidence of it now, but those stairs are significant and would have led to something equally significant. Perhaps another temple upon that pile of rock up there, that rock face, just like it was at Olympia. We see a few remaining buildings, some impressive, but it's the spaces between them. It's the flat topography that you see that makes you wonder, what was it like before when it was fully fleshed out? Every pile of stones that man has erected reflects some kind of vision that he had of something at the moment. The ease of getting up past that rock to perhaps such a shrine. 1934. And I'll just bet you that every cave like this at one time or another sheltered a monk or two. Others leave their cairns all over the world for various reasons. They do the same. Interesting, it's people who put little sticks up here, almost as though they were trying to support this rock. I've not seen this dynamic before, but you can be darn sure it reflects some kind of merit. Imagine the person that carved this. I suspect their name is long lost to history. But given the reverence that one has for, this religion has for the elephant, this was an important bit of merit. What these holes were for, of course, they're reminiscent of the grinding holes of the American Indian. And amidst all of these giant boulders that have fallen off this rock face over the eons, looking at this one where someone at some point in time apparently carved out a stairway and maybe even flattened the top, and yet it's now cattywampus. Was there some kind of a major upheaval up here, or did another big rock just jar it into another position? This set of holes is reminiscent of the Egyptian method of cutting its huge obelisks out of solid rock. And notice that the upper portion of there has separated. What was the intent on this rock? Why bother? Any stick will do. Here people have scratched graffiti into a rock, which now signs ask you not to do. I'll have to figure this out because this is an orientation I haven't seen. We shouldn't be able to see that like that. So what I thought was one large boray is actually two large borays. Plus the two narrow ones that have almost no water in it. The right one does, but the left one doesn't. By way of memo, those were not linga representations along those arcade walkways, but rather lotus blossoms. By way of note, when you're editing, go back to the progression along the galleries and look to see if you can see in the footage the Yani and broken Davapalas, or whatever that is. It's located on my map, or on my depiction of Champasak. Listed in their handout, there's an ancient road going off to the left, somewhere between Boray and Wat Phou. Where that is, I don't know. In this diagram, there's no note of it, but presumably it's right after the Boray, but I don't really know where it is. Assuming that that's the Wat up on top, then it could be anywhere in the middle there. Notice that on top of that temple, that brick section where I noted that's how a lot of the construction is. That's used to hold the sacred linga. See the crocodile stone with incised crocodile, unless it's in that footage and I just didn't recognize it. I did see the elephant stone. To that ancient road, look in this document on the fourth fold-out page, right at the last part of the top paragraph, and there it describes how you can see it, and it also describes that Nandin temple, which I did note, and so we can actually see the footage for the road in there. But it's interesting that the water from that spring was channeled into the back wall of that linga chamber at the end of that back end of that temple complex on top, and actually apparently permanently watered or dripped down onto, I'm guessing, the linga and the Soma Sutra, whatever that is. And that permanent watering is, according to this document, unique and gives Wat Phou its exceptional character. The water complex actually is what gives, again, Wat Phou its uniqueness compared to all other Khmer sanctuaries. We just visited Wat Phou Champasak, and we just went down this road and got up to here, and it gets kind of confusing. Here it's a broken line down through here. This is along the river Mekong, indicating it's a dirt road. It took me several people to ask here. You go by and points you forward, so you go forward a little while, and then you stop and ask, and they point you back, and now you know it's somewhere in between, and you're narrowing it down. Eventually I got to this dirt road, so I followed down, did the same thing, went down here further, and then I got some instructions to come back, so I'm pretty sure that's where we are right now, at Wat Maung Kang. And the only reason I came here is I saw it in the guidebook somewhere, and I thought, no, I want to go see that. Most interesting is this rural environment, so we'll take a closer look at that in a few minutes after we've looked at this old complex here. Now this looks old and tawdry, but you grant that to it given its location. So we'll just walk around. Obligatory array of big stupas and small ones and chickens. A little bit of wood up on top makes that kind of interesting. And that's interesting. This is what you end up looking for after you've gone to about 1,000 of these things. What's novel? A little building, but only because it's maintained. Wicker devices hold bowls of food or hold food directly like fruits, and I think this is where the monks and so forth have their 2 meals each day. Here's our drum tower. And notice that interesting drum up there that's a cylinder, a vertical hanging drum. We've seen it before, but not often in situ. The fadedness actually gives this place its allure, I think, and its location. A modern Buddha shrine, if you will. What's great about this location is its location on the Mekong River. And if all works out today, I hope to be over on that side of the river. Well, it's actually not a side, that's the Daeng island, but I hope to be on that island, and if today possible, make a circuit with my bike around the island, spend the night at a guest house over there. Wooden buildings may well be the dormitories or living areas, if you will, of the monks. Classic old structures. You can imagine what this might have been like when it was brand new. Probably everything was painted in detail, then eventually whitewashed and, of course, forgotten. This area is verdant, rice growing well. Probably because it has an irrigation system of which this little stream here is part, but there's an even bigger cement version up above. By that I mean upstream. Oh, look at the country life. A couple of baby goats there. Dinner is all about us. Another Wat complex being used today for something. Funky old iron bridge that serves its purpose, has been for decades, I'm sure. I got a room for the night on the main side of the Mekong, not on that island because it was getting too late. And so I'm just starting from the old town of Champasak. I'm working my way back up to my hostel and maybe on just memorializing these different temples. Just started on a trip like this, how do you stop? This actually is a very pretty little temple. I wonder where, how, and who makes these drums that you see all over. I haven't seen anything in my travels on that. No shops, nothing like that. Pretty Nagas when they were first painted, I bet you. Not so bad now even. The map coming up this road, it's all a series of little towns, one after the other with no distinction between them. I think each of these Wats probably is for the purpose of each of these little towns. First yellow lamb I've seen over here. Pretty and beautifully maintained. With its own complement of pretty little girls. Hello. 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 I bet it takes some effort to actually keep these as nice as this one is. It's fascinating that you can find these rare examples of good maintenance. Interesting. I would bet the ancient remains of a couple of stupas. And this is the third one. Each of them different, of course, in their own way. All of these places are different in their own way, and yet where I'm more knowledgeable, I could show you how they're very much the same. Same buildings, same functions for these buildings. Remember, underneath these stupas is some kind of relic or a replica of a relic of the Buddha. As you could easily quip about Buddha as you could about the notables of the Christian church, if all their parts were assembled in one place, there'd be quite a crowd. I won't go inside. I've been inside and I don't want to take my shoes and socks off. Bell towers always seem, believe it or not, quaint to me. About these that's notable, all the grounds are well maintained. I'll bet you, but I can't prove it, that because all three of these are on the same road, each town is so tightly meshed in with the other at their whatever border is, that there's an implied competition to maintain a standard that's high. It's always interesting to stop and look at houses like this. It was a beautiful house in its day. It's still quite pretty. The architectural element, that front, whatever you want to call that porch, is a beautiful architectural detail. Nice grounds. This simple fence looks more like something that was used to build a military bridge. So 7 gables, you often wonder, what are the stories behind such a building? You just know there have to be stories behind such a building. It has a wooden slat ceiling to it, which in its day, if it were polished or varnished, that probably look pretty beautiful. Even this side entrance is pretty. Perhaps speaks volumes. Looks like this large plot in the back is part of it. In the right spot, wouldn't this be an elegant house to restore? I don't know the exact function of this building, but it alludes to some of those wooden buildings that I saw in Old Bagan, where they were on wooden pillars. I think this is the same function, just certainly a different construction design. That's almost that small version of that cement stairway unit that would go up to the wooden second floor. I don't know if it's an analogy or not. This almost looks like one of those very large cameos. Whatever I mean by the material that was so marble-like that was used in jewelry, normally for a representation of a person or something. And inside, I'm not going to go, are scenes probably from the Ramayana. Just back there in front of those stupas is again one of those stairway units that would have gone up to whatever that kind of building was that's behind it. I think a temple may very well have replaced that was there. Here's our next place. These are apparently great places for kids to hang out and play. Works for me. But what we really want to look at is that jewel in the back. Well, okay, so the bell tower isn't taken care of, but full of ceremonial boats, or in other cultures, war canoes. We're now on our way across to Dong Daeng Island on the ferry. And this is the ferry. So we can float back down into it. Okay, just got off the ferry boat down there and rode up this street, and there's the sign, plain as day, ferry. And here in this northwest corner is this pretty Wat under restoration. Hopefully they will restore all this and make it a place where you see lots of tourists. So south along the west side of the island and around to the southwest corner where I hope to take another little ferry. I'll leave the motorbike there and then go over and look at another temple, unless I can take the bike across, and maybe I can. If I can, I will. Otherwise, I'll come back up around the other side of this island and back across to the mainland and up to Pakse. Our small little villages.
Ready! Ready!
Sabadi. So much for a motorbike ride around Dong Daeng Island. Maybe I've missed something. I'll go back and see if I can find another road or go down the other side, see if that works. Somebody lives back inside here somewhere. Thought I heard someone harvesting bamboo, and maybe that's what she's doing. After I returned to the ferry road and continued on the asphalt, it was a pretty darn good asphalt road, but I came to a major intersection which would, if I didn't know better, make me think I was actually on the mainland, not on this island. And here's an excellent, well-traveled asphalt. So completely destroying my illusion of, or delusion as to what this island was. Here are rice paddies that are flooded but not yet planted. The symbiotic feeding. Main still standing structure of the Tomo monument. He's sleeping on a serpent. I'll have to get closer to figure that one out. Lingua vases, and I think what they're referring to is this and this as being the remains of that kind of rounded top column, if you will. Maybe the young man that found that lingua. There it is. If we could understand it, is a layout of what we're perhaps going to see. I'm guessing that this is where Vishnu, the line of the serpent, is. And this may be where the linga was found, another linga here. Found in the river by that young man, and it's a small green stone mounted on a bronze pedestal. And the stone apparently goes all the way through the pedestal. Notice that it's designed for water to be poured on the linga and then for it to pour off to the right. As usual, the day is turning into an interesting one, if for no other reason, my mistakes. I berate myself for the mistakes I make. And then afterward I stop and realize that I'm probably processing thousands of new bits of information my brain's never had to deal with before, and make sense out of it as I'm moving along. Interesting bugs, and there's a herd of them running around the forest floor here. If we can get close to them. There's also some other critters. Those two apparently are mating. Either that or one of them made a wrong turn and backed into the other. Town's absolutely littered with them, much as you might expect to see ants running around. A look at a typical forest topography. Rarity, a new English inscribed pedestal. Ancient inscription pedestal, 20 meters. And off we go. To a penchant for being lost. The newspaper will read, he wandered into the jungle and was never seen again. This is like arriving on the spot of some great cathedral 10,000 years from now, or 1,000 or whatever, and seeing a couple of battered stones, and someone says, below this was the crypt of St. Peter, and there's nothing but this. So try to reconstruct this collection of stones and add the ones that are missing. Are more of these square stones I see. Of course, if we knew nothing about the monument stand we just looked at, we know even less about this. But what is beginning to emerge as I walk about is, notice there's a wall of stone, and beyond that I think still another wall, and beyond that a wall. So again, try to imagine what once stood here. It looks like this was a building all the way along around here, even where that tree is, maybe even extending down there into that section. From this perspective, it seems more likely that that was one monument pedestal or whatever, and this was a separate structure, and it looks like it was a structure, like it had a room inside of it, so perhaps it was the temple or one such type building. Here, of course, this now looks like those entry pedestals that sit alongside the doorways. We saw them yesterday at Champasak. Look at that magnificent tree's buttress. Imagine the day the man who laid that nicely carved stone when it was new. How much pride, if any, they felt in the installation, or even more so the completion of the building. Oh, that they should see it now. As I stand here looks like a line of stone. Perhaps this was a causeway. Some more stones that give a faint impression of a structure that once was. And here another nice sign indicating an ancient irrigation system. Seeing butterflies as you walk through pretty forest like this is kind of like biting into a mouthful of ice cream and discovering a rich chocolate bit. That termite stand appears to have grown up alongside the tree. I'm guessing that depression there is perhaps part of the irrigation system, so hopefully we will see it, or they'll have been helpful enough to provide us with still yet another sign. Look at this huge mound, probably 10 feet across or more at the base, riddled with vines rather than a tree. I have to assume that that's the reference to the ancient irrigation system. One of those posts that's a lotus leaf piece for some kind of column. So was there something along here? It looks like there's several of the same kind of things right there. So maybe we're on another street or walkway of some sort. Another depression over here that again might have been part of what they're calling the ancient water system or irrigation system. Following this line of these lotus leaf posts heads and back to where we just walked, you can see that this must have been some kind of a pathway. Now, whether it was the irrigation or not, I don't know. I don't know how that would be relevant to irrigation. It's very definitely a head. An old 7-headed Naga piece. Whether it was always there or just simply placed there for our benefit. In this ridge we can see generally coming over here with some of these squared off blocks, and perhaps even going off that way indicates another structure was here. If so, it was either a large structure or a very long wall, because it looks to continue way down that way. Looking across the wall, we can see past those trees to what must be that remaining building of that temple or palace that we saw in the photo on that illustration board. Structure I'm suggesting must have been a wall, probably is a wall for what is in essence a platform that held either one or more buildings, perhaps surrounding it as a square, if you will, like a building over there and then that building there. An intact lotus blossom post and a complete post rather than a post head that fit on another piece. These might well have been steps, unless this entire area here again was a platform holding a building, and it has that look about it with those two remaining walls or more back and behind it. Also on the platform here, this layout of what look like cornerstones here and maybe midpoint stones there, and center posts that either held a floor or vertical posts for some kind of structure. Based on what I learned at Champasak, these buildings may go back to the 5th century or perhaps the 7th century. You can only imagine what this structure would have looked like. Not to mention that one, which I think is the temple building, or the main one that remains. Interesting that just like many of the mound complexes that I visited this fall that were built along the Ohio or the Mississippi River, so too are these built along this stream. The connection of water to religious sites in most religions around the world that I've encountered is very strong, very evident, very intentional. Again, looking at this inner room like we saw yesterday, it looks like those remaining rocks from the ceiling tend to suggest a arched ceiling. The stones composing the walls are of a very easily worked lava rock, pumice almost, whereas these stones are a more solid, perhaps a solid sandstone, something. A very detailed bit of work. Even now, centuries later, we must applaud the man or men who carved this out. Be a bit surprised that this platform that we're on and this lower level, and perhaps even another lower level, were very intentional, held buildings. You can see the stonework there. We'll walk down and see if we can see over the edge and see if that was an intentionally built wall above the river. Certainly something was along here. It's terraced right where I stand now. What was down there on that corner, I don't know. I would suspect a structure that looked out onto the river. Looking at our temple from this vantage point, we can see that it had a nicely built wall. Now whether this level I'm on now actually sloped down or just has eroded over time or was flat, I don't know. Some more architectural detail, probably just put here by archaeologists at one time so they had a place to stay until there was something to be done with them, because we know from the temples we saw in Myanmar, these particular 7 Naga corners would be on corners on the outside of a building. Now maybe once upon a time this was the outside of a building. Like a linga stand, you can see where the linga would have been mounted in the center, and then the trough created for water to spill out. Some very nice detail left, isn't there? Notice even here some kind of a trough that implies a linga might have been there, and certainly that block there. Interesting that this that we saw as we approached this part of the site is the beginning of this long platform, if you will, going all the way down to that far tree in the center and off again to that tree. Pretty much defines what that large platform area was. Buildings around its perimeter as well as inside of its perimeter. You can see that that road appears to be going right down through there, and yet there's blocks here. And if it went there and hooked to the left immediately, it would enter that corner of that large square plaza, if you will. As I pan back, you'll see that the road we followed up that I'm describing as a road curves around to our left. Makes you wonder, where was it going to or coming from that was so important that it should be that well defined. Around me as I walk out are additional piles of stone as well as a relatively flat area. So perhaps many plazas dominated this, as well as many walls and buildings throughout this area. This young boy is balanced out on those limbs, apparently cutting down or knocking down some kind of nuts. But one thin branch up there that looks like a trident, he was standing on that. He's apparently knocking down or cutting down some kind of nuts or pods or something that you can see right there. Standing on a pretty substantial airline cable or steel cable bridge that's used for everything. I think tuk-tuks can probably get across here. I was looking for a way to get over to Don Daeng Island from down here, the lower part, but I can't. And it's about a couple hundred yards of beach, and I don't even know how I'd get down to it. It's difficult. The only two alternatives here is either go directly back to Pakse and call it a day, or go backtrack to the ferry I took, take it from there over to Dong Daeng, and then try to do what I was trying to do, but it's almost 12 o'clock and I can't be sure of what's over there. Just entered Paksong Waterfalls site. The stream that leads to the falls, I'm guessing. Just taking a look at all the detail because I'm not sure we'll see too much here. There's a lot of ethnic tribal hype here. And about just across the parking lot you can see that pall of pollution. Been constant ever since I left Pakse. It's constant throughout Laos. A series of little kiosks are pretty much empty because it's probably a pretty quiet day. This is a Monday. Of course, there are petrified elephants. And we'll look at this just because I don't know what it is. So we'll look at Village and Ethnic Museum and Jungle Tree House is that way. Occurring to me, and I could be wrong, that this is a resort either built around and or including the falls area. Tourist bridge, but it may be authentic. Been kind of imaginatively developed in a simple rustic fashion, which is just fine. Uniformed people around here, so I'm assuming it's got some connection with the government. So signage in English, so you're pretty much left to your own imagination. Another bridge over there, so we'll go walk it, just because what else am I going to do? A close-up view, it does look like this is made out of a series of bamboo, but I think I may see a steel cable down in there too. There are some steel cables, so cleverly done to hide the support in a main way. The supports in a substantial way. Down and walk out on this transportation bridge, they call it. That goes actually to the restaurant complex, which I won't go to. In English, a substantial bridge. Wonder who built it. Certainly very old. Looking downstream, interestingly enough, a viewpoint walk that I'll go on right now takes us in this direction. So maybe there's even more falls. Follow this path to the natural viewpoint. and waterfall lodging. About to video this log cross section when a lizard that was roosting on top dropped down inside the cavities of that rotted section. If I'd been more observant, I would have pictured him. I'll see if I can get him on the way back. The village and museums off to our right might go up there. But if it looks too tacky, I'll regret. Pull back out. I will go to the jungle tree house. Few problems of being the earliest tourist. You get to walk through all the cobwebs from last night's hunting. This perhaps is the tree house. Looks lived in with a relatively new satellite dish. The riverside lodgings. Old cart underneath this house. The jungle flowers on that vine. We'll get a closer look here. Another house. Platform and a chicken roost beneath for raising dinner. Looks like it's got a power box over there too. Quaint place to live. You can imagine if you loved this kind of environment, you could have a small home that was better built than this, but with all the amenities. Might be kind of cool. It's a pretty plant. I think I've seen something similar to it as a decorative plant in florist shops. The whole area is littered with residences. Here's that fruit we saw in the market. Funky old wagon. Or at least the wheels for it. To Hueng Waterfall and Great Naga Cave. This pathway is made out of cross sections of logs, if it's still the main pathway, and I never know when I wander around. But here we have a footbridge over to a viewpoint, I think. This apparently is the stream from the waterfall. Of course, it flows around all of these homes. I wonder if this ties into the stream that the first set of falls was on. Jungle Bridge. Here, no swimming, no diving. Now, of course, in the wet season, that whole space would be covered with a torrent of water crashing into the pool below. And we might not even be standing where we are. I think we could. But the water level of the pool might be where we are. To break into this pretty scene with reality, but there's a whole bunch of large PVC pipes running water to this complex. Somewhere here we should see a cave, but I don't, unless it's back in behind those pipes and so forth. Great Naga Cave is this way. I'm trying to excite from our view those water pipes. Another interesting bridge. Crossed a couple of streams, I suspect, including the one that makes that falls. But I wanted to look at that big, huge tree there. And its companion, a different kind, of course, I think, with this huge buttress. They certainly are sturdy feeling bridges. The upstream view. Big black critters that are feeding on me. They bite. With no signage, we're confronted with 3 trails. I'll take the upper one. This is correct. So that uphill path just led to somebody's forest plantation of some kind of tree. So I'll just go back down after a good exercising climb. Just a close-up look of these buttresses, this one on edge. But you notice as you look at them, particularly this one here, that they have what almost look like sinew or ligaments of some sort. And maybe that reflects the building up of each larger section. I don't know. Presumably this is it. The ground well swept. This is probably the village temple. My guess is this was built and people were asked to live here. and they provide themselves a living off the tourist. They comes here in bus loads, or at least minivans that can drive straight into here, and then people can actually believe this is a village. Actually be the way some village houses used to look. Sub ID. Every house has wares for sale, and I've never been in any village or through any village that was this well swept and clean. As tourists will go home and talk about how beautifully maintained the native villages are and how well swept the ground is, even though they don't have grass. But here's your pollution. Most of the minivans are here. Shrine that somebody thought to make up. Probably a complete fiction in reality. Interesting pussy willow type tree. Adds nice color. This is a very lush area up along Route 20 north of Pakse. And a lot of the communities are very pretty in the sense that they've got flowers in the community as opposed to others which just look like a mess. Unique. The mosquito issue, it looks like an idyllic layout with its own little pond surrounded by vegetation of some sort, the mountains in the background. It's got power, TV, satellite, and look at, it's got a hammock hanging out on that little floating deck, if you will. Its own fruit. Pretty cool. Don't yet know what this waterfall is because I haven't seen any labels for it yet. But one thing you can be sure of, when the water is really cranking after the wet season, that whole face will be filled, including the part over to the far left. That's a more thunderous sound to boot. And all of this area down where I am would probably be pretty much filled in with water. You can see the water line on those rocks there. I have a little trouble getting back to shore from here without getting wet. Have to be careful messing around with this kind of photography. Actually a pretty neat falls at this time of year. Too much more water and you wouldn't be able to see some of the drama that we see right now. And look at that huge pool for swimming in. Halfway for the adventurous and the agile. We can get over there from here, but it's pretty interesting that there's a neat little bathing pool over there that's nice and safe. Of that pool, which you can see some people fooling around right underneath that hanging vine, and there are other places for all those who would like a little solitude. Certainly a magnificent place for kids to play. Probably laundry and everything else takes place here. Looking for that third falls, following roads around, and found this very pretty place, which I think is probably a reservoir. Pipe to put water into back into the creek, I think. Resort, but why anybody would want to stay there and listen to that bullshit music all day long is beyond me. Follows over that face up there that this young man is taking me to, and you can see also local gardens here. It looks like onions, and I'm not sure what altogether is there. Like onions, all of it. There's some cabbage right there, and I don't know what that is there. Maybe carrots. Just in these neat little rows designed for irrigation, I'm sure. Whether they manually irrigate it or not, I don't know. Bamboo for something. A young woman is weeding the garden apparently. All by hand. Don't know what this is right here. They're a little fenced off garden. keep the animals out of this particular one. This may be an individual family plot or something. There, we're getting closer to the waterfall. He pointed up and said waterfall, but there's not much water there. Contrary to the noise you hear, which I think is coming from right over there. Here's the water's coming out of there from somewhere. This is probably a large swimming pool that also falls off these edges in its own little falls when there's the wet season. Now we can see the falls. See up on top, the far right. I'll pan up so we can get a closer look at that. Probably pretty right now. I think this may be a double falls. Closer to it. Now we're see another pool here that you could swim in if you wanted to. He asked me if I wanted to, but I don't. It's a very conical grinding stone. You'll see, or grinding hole. You'll see a smaller one there. And there have been numerous ones. I'd say there's probably 100 of them that we've tracked all throughout those stones, all throughout that area that we've climbed up through. Self or from the grinding, but that gives you a perfect cone right there. You're pretty sure that's what that is. But if you look at that rock, you see all kinds of round holes that would be grinding stones, perhaps if that rock were orientated vertically instead of the way it is. Snake, or that worm. That looks exactly like the snake that I saw when I pulled up a piece of concrete block at my Arizona property. I don't know if it's a snake or a worm. Cool. And he also pointed to this rock, certainly a different rock than everything else. Exactly why is an interesting question. Chipmunk guide can go right straight through all that, but I can't, so this is where I stop. And the falls is right up there. Because here you have a mix of the lifestyle. So a man and his young son or grandson working on the field, a woman doing something in the stream, cleaning, I think, what they bring out of the field. Further on, a couple of pigs on the bank, and then a bunch of young boys playing in the stream, because it's at their age they can still have fun. This young man has a job. Young boy's paradise. Fully intends that he should play with mud and get it all over him. Because as soon as they're done, they just jump in the water and clean it all off and go home for dinner. Just finished our walk up. And he's got another group of tourists to take. On the veranda of my nice little guest house room. It's a large room. Another building going up next door. That lady may be the owner. Don't really know. Herd of cattle moving through my view. Not to mention herds of chickens around. I don't know if these are village herds or what, but the cattle just roam in varying numbers wherever their leader takes them. Into people's front yards and so forth. Only once did I see a man throw rocks at him just to get him to get out of his yard and stay out. I love the rain at the end of the day. Another passing visit. Looks like a duplicate of the building that I'm in. Another very nice addition to their rental complex. If these people actually own it, this family, it's a great way to build a future. These people, they may not do it with loans. They may do it with money they've accumulated assiduously, with the entire family working. Early morning view of my backyard. Deck out here. Bathroom through that door. One of those newly built cabanas, and I'll walk you through these lovely grounds. All of this for 60 kip. The first place I went to was 70 kip, and it was just a room in a cement block building, and the air conditioner didn't work, although she wanted me to, she was trying to convince me it worked because the light went on, but there was no cold air. was just a dump. Another of their buildings. Next door you can see someone else is building one, if in fact these people don't own that also. It's rough, but it's pretty. And inexpensive as can be, as Southeast Asia is. Units, I don't believe, have bathrooms in them, so you get those for, I think it's 50 kip or 40 kip versus the 60 I'm paying. The automobile. Driving by and I saw what looked like a brick operation, and that's exactly what it is, so I got the headman's approval to video, so that's what I want to do. And the reason for that is you see incredible amounts of brick. So now we'll find out how they actually make these things. Pile the raw material, and I'm guessing there are different mixes, but I don't really know. Maybe we can see his old stuff that'll end up being recycled just because it's damaged or whatever. They mix it somehow. The water comes in from here, they pull it over there. How they mix the material, whether there's different colors or whatever, I don't know. But here you can see how they've cut it right here into chunks. And then she'll take those chunks and stick them in the top of this machine over. So let's go take a look at that. Totally self-contained brick making machine. So you can haul this thing in anywhere in the world and start making bricks if you got the material that takes the raw material, chunks it up, and then now they're going to extrude it out the bottom through here. And then those wires go across and that will cut it. And that's all manual. She determines when she needs to cut it, I guess. No, I think it occurs automatically. You see, if she's quality control. If she looks at it, sees something wrong, if there's something wrong, she just throws it down here and gets it out of here. And that's going to go back over in that other pile. But most of the buildings you see being built today, this is what they're built with. Making a decision that most of this stuff is junk. So for whatever reason, they're getting rid of it. It could be that it's got too much water in it, so it's slumping. And she sees that, feels that, says, no, this stuff's no good. Do it again. Just by throwing it back in the hopper, it's going to correct whatever the problem was, because that's what he's doing, throwing it back in. But imagine this young girl here in the red and white stripe. This is her future, unless she can find an alternative to it. And apparently these are passing muster now, because that same mud's coming through and she's accepting it. Maybe it's getting mixed in with the new stuff and it's giving just the right consistency. Gently laid down, because that stuff could collapse into those individual holes and the whole thing has to be thrown out again. So she's carefully doing that. And the next lady does it even more so. Over here and see what these guys are doing. Here you can see how, at least in this instance, they're actually using it. You've got a bucket there with some kind of grout in it, or what passes for it, and he's putting it in there. And then this man over here doing the same thing. Now what exactly they're building, I don't know, but notice that it's stepped. You can see the steps in it right there. From that layout in there, that this is some kind of a kiln, and all this wood over here is used, so that's some way of maybe quick drying rather than just leaving it sitting in the sun. Go back to where these men are working. They are working on a kiln. Now whether this is an expansion or an innovation expansion, I don't know. Don't know whether they periodically have to do it or not. Usually the little boy there had a dog, a little small dog that was barking too much, and he grabbed a stone, hit it over the head a couple of times, and held onto it until this one here, until it quit doing what it was doing. That may be one of the quick ways that they teach dogs. You respect human beings and what we tell you, period. Looking at those that are probably pretty much dried out, but I don't know. You can still see some brown color in there, so they're not completely dried. But they'll leave them out in the sun in this fashion to dry. There's a space between these things so that they can continue to get air even on the sides there. And this has to be carefully done, and they lay them in there carefully, gently, so it won't collapse. Truck that'll haul some of these away, perhaps. Last pan of the entire operation. Most of these people live in this area, I'm sure, or close enough to it. Some of them live right there in those little temporary shanties. It works, men, women, doesn't seem to be any distinction. They all do the same tasks. A pretty little setting alongside the road, traveling down to Daeng from Bang Bang. Pretty little spot to live. Don't see that many geese about like this, and I've seen very few of them with their young. Interesting how much the lifestyle is represented by the animals that roam freely throughout a community. Whether they know their attachment to certain humans or not, I don't know. I suspect maybe they do. Consistency of food, although they seem to be left on their own to grub for whatever they can find. If it hasn't occurred to you, consider that when you eat a chicken, a duck, or a pork over here, you're really eating all of the refuse that they can find in their community. There's very little I can do on this kind of travel to memorialize in my mind, before my mind, what I've seen with several hundred miles of travel, except to try to record these scenes and the sounds that are accompanying them. It's interesting how some places look so neat. While so much looks so chaotic. Decided to find this waterfalls. I made a picture of the sign on my iPhone, so I should be able to find it. And I'm following the road. I got about 1 kilometer in, and the road went to the left, at least the most well-used portion of it. But as I got down a steep hill, I realized and came to a what looks like a rock quarry, which explains why the road shifts to nice gravel from just plain dirt. So I will continue on to the right here. That may be a man going down to pick up a load of gravel. That is the workhorse of this Southeast Asia. It's what they call the iron buffalo. My reason for doing this and for making this side trip is that I saw the sign for a falls. It's not on my list of falls, and it is down this dirt road. And it's 8 kilometers, and I figured, well, that's a total of 16 miles on a rough road versus the 71 miles I was anticipating doing a third day on, and I'm going to scratch that since it's just a brutal effort, I think. Exactly 4 miles in, I have to go 8 miles. Spectacular country, but that hill right there bothers me. It's just very gnarly. It's not a nice road. It's all rutted up from the rains. So I'm not sure I want to go any farther if that's part of what the next 4 miles could be. If you want to see a real village, you come out a few miles off the middle of a main road between two fairly decent sized towns, not where the vans take you. Notice all the lumber piled under. Quiet little place to live, eh? Probably a pump that fills those tanks and then feeds water to everybody. And this power. Now that's an innovation compared to the place in Myanmar, where lots of those don't have any power and no water from a safe source underground. The approach into this little town from the highway, we're about 3 miles in right now. Notice how they have just piled those tree roots there. Whether they're decoration or not, I don't know. But notice how neatly everything is done in this little village. Fenced off little garden plots to keep the pigs out of them and everything else that eats up what you grow. And here you just throw any trash you have from the kitchen down below. Guess what? Your mobile garbage disposal eats it all up. And I wonder if these branches are designed to keep birds away from it too. And there in the background. And no sounds of motors. There will be, including mine. But not much. Just come that way from my half adventure, and I'm now in Daeng at the big market here, or their big market. And I'll go wander around that. And then I'm going to come in here and have noodle soup. This thing right here. They had a bigger rain last night than we did. It was a slew last night, is really a slew this morning. Here we are inside their large building. It looks relatively dry and normal, other than the other ones, of course, because it's a smaller town. But local villagers has everything that they need and could probably get in Pakse, except for something really big or bizarre. My guess is that in this small town, on my way to Paksong, they have torn down an old monastery or whatever the building would have been, temple, and are now going to build a new one. Perhaps that building to the right indicates what the old one must have looked like, at least in condition. Two guest houses here, Savannah, the one on the right, and this one is Paksong Guest House, and I'll stay in the first. It has a room that actually gives me a little view out onto the river and a little quiet patio area looking at the little side river, plus 2 restaurants, one of which I'll try out, but right now I want to go up to the market. Pretty little view in the outskirts slightly of Paksong. Otherwise, the best description I can give to Paksong would still be fair shithole. Because the first major town coming off of that east to west 71 mile of construction that now has apparently completed the road, but they have to finish it. Here, that one a mouse or a rat trap, and I don't know what the other one's for. First time I've seen traps here. Or a brazier pot. Put your pot on that, your fire underneath it, made out of rebar. With this, actually. Nice pestles. Either that or a dang good club. Pakse early morning outside my guest house room. Here we are at the first falls, which I think is Tad Young Falls. One of those beautiful flowers that I saw on the way up to the Plain of Jars. If I can get a view up inside of it. Isn't that a beauty? I assume he's captive. Place is coming alive, to say the least. Restaurant, but I don't know if this is food for the restaurant. I assume it will serve both purposes. If you want to buy it, you can. This is a nice little layout here, as is my intent on the first one fear of the tourists. A few ways to turn unique experiences into unique experiences before the tourists get there. This just leads us to the area over the falls, of course. You can see that. There's the route down. Proved safety standards one would expect in an Asian country. Then I saw that it wasn't, and there's one that's been opened up, so it's some kind of fruit that gets in it. But I'm guessing it falls from this tree. God forbid you're underneath when it's the one coming down on top of your head. One of the other things that's magnificent about this location is the rich sense of jungle that you have standing here. Are nice but dangerous because they're pebbles and cement. So the pebbles with water on them act just like glass. Pretty flowers on the way up. Part of the railing you probably don't want to use. Interesting to wonder how much more or less dramatic it would be in the wet season. Would it cover up a lot of the elegance? Walk to the other falls, Pat Fan Falls, from here. It's about a 5-minute walk from here. Don't know what Pusawan means or what its significance is to here. But this, of course, makes a lovely picnic area for those who have planned it that well. And if they are suicidal, to short trip after their last meal. This magnificent tree in your backyard, framing the entry to your home. So long ago, the government sold out its interest in Wat Pha Falls to the wealthy. That's of course redundant, they're both one and the same. And now they make money off of it as a draw for their resort. I understand the business concept. Irony as it is, they don't even put anything up there as a sign coming from the east to the west telling you even of the resort. You have to look behind yourself and know that that's probably where the sign is. That temporary structure immortalized forever. Pretty walk. One thing you could say is that because it's a resort and perhaps a successful one, it'll be in considerable ways more developed and better developed and safer. And well, we'll go right, because the toilets are that way also. A good example, these toilets look far more modern and better kept than anything I've seen. This has an incentive. Only understand the incentive of appeasing and pandering and fawning to your wealthy supporters. Not quite as dramatic as Wat Luang, although perhaps it's more so during the wet season. It's a deep cavity down into there. Go down, but I'm not sure it gets any more dramatic. Path leading down here, unmarked. I don't know if it gives us a better view or not, but we'll pursue it. Anything else, it should be a decent hike, because from here I just shoot straight into Pakse and get my ticket, hopefully, for a bus tomorrow morning. A dangerous climb down and an arduous climb back up, and I'm not sure we get that much more of a perspective. The trail that I'm following has dumped off the other side of that hogback ridge that the viewpoint is on, so we're on the opposite side of that ridge from the falls. But you can hear water rushing down here, not much, but I think I'll pursue it in case there's a little mini falls that prompted this trail in the first place. On the other hand, it might be just a local villager's access trail for those who work or get some benefit from the resort. Exciting that there's a little teeny falls. Tracking a bird here. This one here. Because he keeps moving around in a clockwise fashion. Unless I'm surrounded by about 10 of those same birds. But I can't see him fly. I stopped. Now he's above us. Climbed up and away after he think he saw me. The best view you'll get of the falls. It's off of a poster in the restaurant. A pretty little section of homes and patterns and flowers.